Welcome to Insights. I'm Adam Rivers.
And I'm Sarah Collins. In this episode, we'll reflect carefully on the Qur'an, verse by verse, focusing on wording, context, and coherence.
Right, and just to set the stage for you listening, we're really continuing our journey here.
Actually, yeah, a quick recap. In our last episode, we reflected on the parables in the Qur'an.
Yeah, how they basically only misguide those who actively and rebelliously deviate from the truth.
Exactly. And today, the revelation doesn't just leave that as some, abstract concept. It gives us the precise, really terrifying anatomy of that rebellion.
It moves from the theoretical directly into the practical.
It really does.
So the verse we are reflecting on today is verse 27 of Surah Al-Baqarah. The translation of the meaning reads, "Those who break the covenant of Allah after contracting it, and sever that which Allah has ordered to be joined and cause corruption on earth. It is those who are the losers."
Wow. Okay, so as you listen to those profound words, you kind of have to ask yourself, what exactly makes a society collapse from the inside out?
And how does this verse provide a perfectly detailed blueprint of that human ruin? To really unpack this, we have a look at how the Quran transitions from the abstract idea of losing your way into three highly practical, highly destructive behaviors.
Right. It doesn't just say people become misguided. It shows us the exact mechanics of how they dismantle their own existence.
Exactly. And the very first action mentioned is breaking the covenant.
Okay, breaking the covenant.
To understand the weight of this, we need to look at the Arabic root used for breaking, which is yanqudun. This comes from the letters nun, kaf, and a dad.
So it's not just a sterile, legalistic word for canceling a contract, right? Like tearing up a piece of paper.
Not at all. In classical Arabic, this root paints a deeply physical, visceral image. It specifically describes the action of someone purposefully untwisting a strongly woven rope.
Oh, wow. That is a very specific, labor-intensive image. I mean, when you think about how a rope is made, it takes immense effort.
Right.
You have to gather hundreds of fragile, individual fibers, weave them together, and twist them under incredibly high tension until they become a robust, unyielding structure.
Like something strong enough to secure a ship to a dock or bear a massive load?
Yeah, exactly.
Uh-huh.
So are you saying the linguistic root here implies that this breaking isn't an accident?
That is precisely the point. I mean, if you drop a glass, it shatters in a second by accident. But you cannot accidentally untwist a heavily braided rope.
No, you'd have to really try.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Imagine someone sitting down and painstakingly, deliberately unpicking every single thread, one by one.
Until that incredibly strong rope is reduced to a pile of weak, useless fibers that can't hold anything together.
Right. And this action absolutely requires continuous intention. The breaker described in this verse isn't ignorant.
They know exactly what they're doing.
Yes, this is someone who knew the covenant, who understood its strength and its purpose, and yet deliberately unraveled it with their own hands.
Yeah.
It's a conscious dismantling of a bond.
Okay, but if it's an intentional unraveling, what exactly is the covenant we are untwisting?
Well, that's the big question.
Because when we hear the word covenant, I think the modern mind immediately jumps to a historical religious promise or maybe a set of ancient theological doctrines.
Sure, that's a common assumption.
But if this is a universal blueprint for human ruin, is it something deeper? Is it like the actual hardwiring of our own conscience?
It is absolutely that deeper hardwiring. The covenant in the Revelation is not merely a historical event that happened thousands of years ago,
Okay.
nor is it confined to a specific demographic or a mechanical religious ritual. It represents the pure human fitra, our innate, uncorrupted nature.
So it's the very intellect that has been given to human beings to intuitively distinguish right from wrong.
Yes, we are talking about the grand moral law that has been embedded deep within the human conscience. This is the ultimate trust that humanity accepted.
Which requires us to act as builders on this earth, to actively do good, and to maintain the delicate balance of justice in every aspect of life.
Exactly. When you look at it through this lens, the covenant is a cosmic ethical standard that is universally recognizable by the human soul. It's the internal compass.
Wait, that completely shifts the paradigm.
Oh, so?
Well, this means that ignoring our own basic human conscience, that visceral gut feeling we get when we witness an injustice, or the guilt we feel when we exploit someone that is literally categorized here as breaking a divine treaty.
It is.
So we aren't just ignoring a feeling, we are committing an act of cosmic treason against our own design.
Yes, that is exactly what the Revelation is establishing. Every single time you silence that inner alarm bell that rings when you witness cruelty, You are intentionally unpicking a thread of that divine treaty.
You are untwisting the rope.
Precisely. And the verse emphasizes the tragedy of this with the phrase after its confirmation, or min ba'di mīthāqihi. The root for confirmation here involves the letters wa, ta, and kaf.
And what does that imply?
It implies an intense tightening, a profound firmness. This covenant wasn't a vague passing suggestion. It was intensely validated and secured.
Validated how, though? Because if we were talking about a society of skeptics, they might argue that morality is entirely subjective.
Right, just a byproduct of evolutionary biology.
Yeah, or social conditioning. So how does the revelation argue that this internal rope is firmly tightened and objectively real?
Well, it is validated through multiple, undeniable channels. It's validated by the cosmic proofs we see in the universe's perfect balance.
Like the laws of physics and nature that demand equilibrium.
Exactly. And it's validated by the psychological proofs we feel in our own inescapable desire for fairness and justice.
I mean, even a thief gets angry when he is stolen from, which kind of proves the innate recognition of justice.
That's a great point. And finally, it is validated by the revelatory proofs provided in the Qur'an itself, which act as a mirror to that internal conscience.
That brings up a really terrifying danger, especially for those who consider themselves religious or righteous.
Oh, absolutely.
Because if the covenant is this deeply ethical, awake conscience, what happens when religion just becomes an inherited culture?
That's where things get dangerous.
You find individuals who think they are practicing faith because they go through the physical motions passed down by their ancestors.
They pray, they fast, they attend services.
Right, but then they go to the office and oppress their employees, they cheat in business, they validate political tyranny.
And you have just hit on one of the most severe warnings in the entire Qur'an. If someone is engaging in those oppressive behaviors, they are actively breaking the covenant.
Regardless of how many mechanical rituals they perform.
Exactly. The revelation refuses to validate a superficial, cultural religion that is disconnected from strict ethical and moral commitments.
Because true faith is a state of constant awake conscience, not blind habit.
Spot on. When a person reduces faith to mere physical movements while their heart is comfortable with injustice, they have already unraveled the rope. They have broken the internal treaty.
Wow. Okay, so if that internal foundation is gone, there's no way the external structure holds.
No way at all.
You can't have a hollow core and a strong exterior. Does the revelation explicitly track that collapse outward? Like if the first step is this internal betrayal of our nature, what is the ripple effect?
Well, if you deliberately dismantle the foundation of a house, what happens to the walls?
They crack and collapse.
Right. Do they just stand there floating in midair? No. The internal betrayal naturally and forcefully dictates an external collapse. Which brings us to the second action mentioned in the verse, severing what Allah has ordered to be joined.
Okay, moving to the second part.
The word used for severing here is kata. This is the absolute opposite of building, joining, and networking.
It implies cutting something off completely, slicing
Cutting
through a connection and leaving the two ends isolated and dead.
Exactly. And what is so striking and universally applicable here is that the Qur'an uses the word ma, meaning what or that which.
Meaning it doesn't specify only one type of relationship.
Correct. This makes the command universally applicable to all vital networks of life.
So it is referring to a systemic severing, not just a personal one, like not just skipping family reunions.
Right. It applies to severing the ties of human brotherhood and basic justice. It applies to the hypocrisy of severing your words from your actions.
Where a person's public persona is completely divorced from their private reality.
Yeah, we see that all the time. It applies to severing the equitable relationship between rulers and the people they govern, replacing consultation, transparency, and fairness with oppression and silence.
And crucially, as we see so vividly today, it applies to severing the respectful, harmonious connection humans are supposed to have with the natural environment.
Absolutely.
The biological analogy comes to mind immediately. It's like a human body where the nervous system suddenly stops communicating with the vital organs.
That's a perfect way to look at it.
The organs might still be there, but without the network of communication, the body is effectively dead. So how does this specific concept of severing explain the global anxieties that you and I and our listeners are witnessing right now?
Well, think about it. We are living in the most hyper-connected technological era in human history, yet everyone feels completely severed.
Yeah, that's the paradox.
And that paradox is exactly what this verse diagnoses. We have technological connection, but we have severed the organic connections.
Right, and when the profound ethical connections are severed, The societal body begins to shut down, even if its individual members are still technically walking around.
Exactly. We can trace the most severe modern global crises directly back to this concept of kata, severing.
Let's look at our modern relationship with the natural world as an example of that. We don't view ourselves as part of a joined ecosystem anymore.
Precisely. Humanity severed its organic tie with nature. The modern industrial mindset chose to view the Earth not as a living trust or a joint partner in existence, but as an enemy to conquer.
Or simply as an endless warehouse to exploit for rapid, consequence-free profit.
And the direct, undeniable result of that severing is the ecological collapse we are currently living through. We cut the tie, and now we are suffocating from the lack of oxygen.
And it happens on a psychological level, too. The modern epidemics of clinical anxiety, the extreme social isolation, the breakdown of local communities.
Oh, absolutely.
Are you saying these are explicitly diagnosed in this verse as the direct result of severing our holistic connections?
I am saying the revelation diagnoses the root of the disease with absolute surgical precision.
That's incredible.
Everything we categorize today as a political crisis, a social fragmentation, or a psychological epidemic, these are merely the late-stage symptoms.
The core disease is the severing that immediately follows the breaking of that internal covenant.
Yes. When an economic system severs the wealthy from the poor by hoarding resources, creating massive wealth gaps, and ignoring mutual social responsibility, that is the active systemic practice of this severing.
And when intellectual movements sever scientific advancement from ethical boundaries, creating technology without asking if we should, they destroy the balance of human progress.
The revelation points out that once you break the internal moral compass, you will inevitably take a blade to the intricate web of relationships that sustains human life, sanity, and society.
That is a terrifying progression. We have the internal break, the unraveling of the conscience. Then we have the relational severing, cutting the ties to each other, to justice, to the environment.
Right.
What is the final, inevitable stage of this descent? Because it feels like once you are isolated and devoid of an internal compass, there's only one direction left to go.
Well, what grows in a garden when the caretaker decides to sever the clean water supply and pump in poison instead?
You don't just get a neutral lack of growth. You get active decay, toxicity, and death.
Exactly. And this brings us to the third pillar in the verse, spreading corruption on earth, or yufsiduna fil ard.
Okay.
The root of the word for corruption, fa, sin, dal, literally means leaving the state of moderation, balance, and rectitude.
It means to spoil, to rot, to ruin.
Yes. The revelation is showing us that corruption is not a random accident that just happens to appear in society. It is the bitter, entirely inevitable fruit of the first two actions.
So corruption is the active manifestation of the severed ties.
Exactly. Once you untwist the moral rope within yourself, and once you cut the ties of empathy and justice with those around you, the only possible behavior left to manifest in the world is active destruction.
And it manifests on the grand stage of the earth where humans were meant to be stewards.
Right. It looks like political tyranny enslaving people.
It looks like economic exploitation reducing human beings to mere commodities on a spreadsheet.
And it looks like the active spread of racism, division, and hatred that tears communities apart for political gain.
But here is the massive paradox that we see in the modern world. The people who are actively destroying the environment, or the executives exploiting workers in sweatshops, or the politicians spreading division, they rarely wear a villain's cape.
They really don't.
They don't walk up to a microphone and say, I am here to spread corruption on Earth. In fact, they usually have massive public relations teams calling them innovators, disruptors, or national saviors.
That's so true.
How does the revelation address this profound lack of self-awareness? How do people who are actively rotting the world convince themselves they are curing it?
This is where the psychological insight of the Qur'an is absolutely breathtaking. It doesn't just describe the action, it describes the psychology of the actor.
Okay, how so?
It explicitly addresses this exact phenomenon in other verses within this very same chapter, pointing out that corruptors almost never admit their corruption.
In fact, they loudly claim to be the ultimate reformers and visionaries. They say, we are only putting things in order.
Yes. And why does this happen? How is this delusion possible? Because when they broke that internal covenant we discussed earlier, they didn't just break a rule, they smashed their own moral compass.
The internal mechanism that detects right and wrong, beautiful and ugly, is completely destroyed.
Right.
Hold on, so the blindness itself is the punishment. Because they voluntarily abandon their innate moral logic, they literally reach a state of psychological inversion.
Yes, exactly.
They actually genuinely believe their destructive actions are helping society.
Yes, the blindness is both the natural consequence and the ongoing punishment. They disable their own intellect, which is the very foundation of human accountability.
Wow.
They literally reach a state where they see ugly as beautiful, and they view their ruinous actions as civilizational progress.
Like how their ruthless exploitation of the Earth's finite resources is rebranded as infinite economic growth.
Exactly. Or their hoarding of wealth is rebranded as job creation.
And their political tyranny and suppression of free speech is rebranded as maintaining national security.
The vocabulary changes, but the rock is identical.
That is a chilling thought. The idea that you could be contributing to the downfall of your own civilization while patting yourself on the back for being a visionary.
It really makes you look at modern progress with a much more critical eye.
Definitely. When a massive tech monopoly isolates people in algorithmic echo chambers, creating massive social division and anxiety, they call it connecting the world.
Right.
But based on this verse, that is the exact definition of severing and corrupting.
Precisely. And we see this exact same blindness, not just in the secular or corporate world, but in the religious sphere as well.
Oh, for sure. Think about those who aggressively fight against true societal or spiritual renewal by blindly clinging to inherited, outdated cultural superstitions.
Yes. They disable their intellects and reduce profound transformative faith to empty, mindless rituals that do absolutely nothing to prevent injustice in the real world.
And by doing so, they are actively participating in worldly corruption because their hollow version of faith offers no resistance to tyranny or greed. It actually provides cover for it.
Exactly. It's the ultimate rationalization.
They think because they are performing the ritual, they are exempt from the moral requirement of the covenant.
Right. The revelation shows us that corruption often starts as a very slight deviation in the compass, a minor rationalization, like it's just business,
Yeah.
or it's just how the world works.
But left unchecked and masked by this powerful delusion of righteousness, it spreads through a society like a devastating plague, consuming everything in its path.
And if this is the plague, this triad of breaking, severing, and corrupting, the revelation delivers a very final, echoing verdict at the end of the verse.
It calls these people the losers.
Yes.
Why is the language here so absolute? Because losing usually implies a game or a temporary setback, but the tone here feels existentially heavy.
Well, if a man trades his eyesight, his sanity, and his home for a handful of counterfeit coins, has he won a bargain?
Obviously not.
He might hold the coins and think he is wealthy, but he has lost his very ability to live. We have to analyze the immense linguistic weight of the closing phrase in Arabic, "Ulaika humal kasirun."
Okay.
Every single word in that phrase is designed to convey absolute totality.
Walk us through that linguistic breakdown. How does the grammar elevate this from a simple insult to an existential fact?
Let's start with the demonstrative pronoun ulaika, which translates to those.
Okay.
In Arabic rhetoric, this specific pronoun is used to indicate distance. It linguistically pushes them away, distancing them from the ranks of true, upright humanity.
It's as if the text is saying, look at them over there, far removed from the nobility of human potential.
Exactly. Then comes the pronoun hum, which translates to they. In this grammatical structure, it creates a restriction or exclusivity.
Meaning the ultimate loss is entirely and exclusively locked onto them.
Yes, it's not just that they lose something. It's that the very concept of ultimate loss is defined by them.
Wow.
And finally, the definite article al is attached to the word kasirun, making it the losers. This signifies total, absolute, comprehensive loss.
So this isn't about losing a business deal, suffering a temporary material setback, or losing an election.
No, this is the ultimate existential loss. By breaking the covenant, they lost their internal compass and peace of mind.
By severing ties, they lost their support network, their humanity, and their empathy.
And by corrupting the earth, they destroyed their own habitat and the future of their descendants.
They may think they are winning when they are amassing illegal wealth or tyrannical power, but they reap only psychological hell.
They lose their true self, they lose life's true purpose, and ultimately they lose their eternal destiny.
It is fascinating to see how the verse structures this. There is a very specific sequence here: breaking, then severing, then corrupting.
Yeah, it's very deliberate.
It's like watching the pathology of a disease. It starts microscopic in the cell, then it spreads to the tissue, and finally it causes the whole organ system to shut down. Is this sequence intentional? Does it mirror how sociologists or psychologists view the breakdown of human behavior?
The sequence is incredibly intentional and maps flawlessly onto human psychology and sociology. It's the exact three-stage progression of societal ruin. Stage 1 is the breaking. This is the internal psychological collapse of personal values. It's the moment the individual rationalizes away their conscience in the dark.
And stage 2 is the severing. This translates that internal collapse into negative external behavior.
Exactly. It is marked by apathy, extreme selfishness, isolation from the needs of others, and turning a blind eye to injustice.
Right. The severing is almost passive at first. It's the decision not to care. It's walking past the suffering.
Yes, but that apathy cannot remain passive forever. It inevitably metastasizes into stage 3, the corrupting.
This is where the behavior becomes active, positive external destruction and exploitation.
You move from ignoring the poor to actively exploiting them. You move from ignoring environmental guidelines to actively dumping toxins into the river.
This sequence proves that the Qur'an treats the absolute root cause of societal issues, not merely the superficial symptoms.
Absolutely.
That completely undermines how modern society tries to solve its problems. We usually treat the symptoms. If there is corporate fraud, we pass a new anti-corruption law. If there is an environmental disaster, we invent a new carbon capture technology.
But if you understand this verse correctly, passing stricter laws or inventing better technology will never actually fix a society's problems.
If the underlying culture still normalizes severing ties and breaking ethical promises.
Absolutely never. You cannot legislate morality into a population that has consciously untwisted its internal moral rope.
Anti-corruption laws completely fail if the internal covenant of the individuals hasn't been rebuilt first. People will simply find loopholes, or the enforcers of the law will themselves become corrupt.
And this applies not just to local communities, but to the grandest macro levels of human existence, the rise and fall of entire civilizations.
That historical perspective is crucial. We tend to think of empires falling because of barbarian invasions, or running out of gold, or losing a crucial battle.
But when we study the grand sweep of history, we see that massive empires rarely fall purely because of a sudden external invasion or a lack of advanced military technology.
They collapse from the inside out when this exact triad takes over their culture.
When the foundational covenants of justice and human dignity are broken by the ruling class, when the integration between the rich and the poor is severed, leaving a massive resentful underclass, and when the economic and political systems are engineered to produce corruption rather than value, that civilization is historically doomed.
It becomes a hollowed-out tree just waiting for a strong wind.
The Qur'an is outlining a universal historical law. Any nation, any empire, any corporation that adopts this triad of ruin will inevitably be counted among the losers, no matter how mighty their armies, how advanced their AI, or how tall their skyscrapers.
This paints a terrifyingly accurate picture of human history, and it serves as a massive warning for our current global civilization.
But it really does.
But let's talk about the timeline of this ruin. Does a single mistake condemn an individual or a society to this fate? We all have moments of selfishness. We all have moments where we ignore our conscience.
Sure.
Does slipping up once mean we have untwisted the rope and are destined to be among the losers?
Well, does a single drop of rain carve a massive canyon out of solid rock? Or does it take a continuous, relentless, raging river over a long period of time?
A relentless river, obviously.
Right. The linguistic brilliance of the revelation answers your question perfectly through its use of grammar.
Okay.
The verbs used for these three destructive actions, yankuduna, which means they break, yaktauna, they sever, and yufsaduna, they corrupt, are all conjugated in the present tense.
And what is the significance of the present tense in classical Arabic rhetoric?
In Arabic rhetoric, the present tense doesn't just mean something is happening right now. It indicates continuous, renewed, and persistent action. It implies a habit.
Oh.
The revelation is not condemning someone who makes a one-off mistake, realizes they messed up, feels genuine remorse, and works hard to correct it.
Because human beings are fallible. The covenant accounts for repentance and return.
Exactly. What this verse is describing is a deeply entrenched lifestyle of destruction. It is describing an obstinate, continuous methodology of living, where breaking promises, severing vital ties, and spreading corruption become the daily, normalized, standard operating procedure of an individual or an entire society.
It is the relentless river, not the single drop of rain.
Perfectly said.
That brings us back to the environment, which seems to be the most glaring, undeniable proof of this continuous present tense destruction today.
It really is.
Let's focus on our cosmic surroundings. We treat the earth like a factory floor. We assume it is just dead matter for us to manipulate.
Right.
But the Qur'an seems to view the physical world very differently. How does this specific concept of corruption on Earth relate to the massive ecological disasters we see on the news every single day?
The revelation presents a stunningly different paradigm from the modern materialistic view. In the Qur'an, the earth is never depicted as a dead rock floating in a cold void, waiting to be pillaged by its inhabitants.
It is repeatedly described as a living, breathing entity that is in a constant state of praising its creator.
Yes, it is a sacred trust, an amana, handed to humanity. We were placed here as Khalifa, which means stewards, caretakers, and responsible deputies, not absolute owners.
So viewing a forest purely as timber to be monetized, or viewing a river simply as a convenient waste dump for industrial runoff, isn't just a regulatory violation.
No.
You are saying it is a direct violation of our spiritual covenant.
It is the ultimate betrayal of the terms of our existence. When we look at global warming, mass desertification, the rapid extinction of vital species, and the choking plastic pollution of our oceans, these are not just unfortunate industrial side effects or the cost of doing business.
They are the literal physical manifestations of verse 27 of Surah Al-Baqarah.
Exactly. Humanity severed its organic, respectful ties to nature out of sheer, short-sighted greed. We crowned ourselves absolute masters and conquerors of the earth, actively fighting against the natural balance.
The natural disasters, the climate chaos, and the ecological pandemics we face today are the direct, logical, inescapable result of trying to run a beautifully balanced ecosystem with the arrogant mindset of a plunderer.
That is exactly it.
And it's fascinating how the macro perfectly reflects the micro. The physical environmental ruin around us perfectly mirrors the psychological ruin inside the modern individual.
They are completely intertwined. The person who lives this severed lifestyle, disconnected from nature, disconnected from community, disconnected from their own innate conscience, becomes trapped in a suffocating prison of extreme selfishness.
They are utterly devoid of internal tranquility or peace.
They end up living a hellish, anxious existence. They become constantly paranoid about losing their power or their wealth because that is the only thing they have left.
They are completely alienated from the warmth of genuine human connection and the soothing harmony of nature.
And their existential loss, the reality of being among losers, begins right here in this world, long before the ultimate loss in the hereafter.
It does not matter how much money they have hoarded in their offshore bank accounts. Internally, they are bankrupt and decaying.
Right.
This has been an incredibly profound breakdown of a single verse. It is a mirror held up not just to ancient history, but directly to our society today.
It really is.
But as we look at this mirror, the question becomes, how do we actively resist this triad of ruin?
That's the most important part.
How do we integrate the cure into our daily routines tomorrow morning? Because it is easy to nod along to this philosophically, but what does it mean when the alarm clock goes off?
We have to ask ourselves, can a society honestly claim to be righteous, advanced, or deeply faithful if its streets are filthy, its workers are systematically cheated out of a living wage, and its environment is toxic?
No, of course not.
The Qur'an absolutely refuses this artificial split between private belief and real-world public behavior. True faith is not measured by the volume of your claims. It is mathematically measured by your tangible, positive impact on your human and cosmic surroundings.
So it comes down to the microscopic choices.
Exactly. Practically speaking, tomorrow morning, fulfilling the covenant looks like respecting traffic laws so you don't endanger the lives of others.
That is honoring the tie of human life.
Right. It looks like picking up trash to maintain clean streets. That is honoring the earth. It looks like mastering your profession so you provide honest, high-quality value to your community.
That is joining what should be joined.
It looks like respecting differing opinions to build intellectual bridges rather than tearing them down for ego. And crucially, it looks like actively speaking up to defend the oppressed in your workplace or community, even when it is uncomfortable.
Because those actions are the exact inverse of breaking, severing, and corrupting.
Yes. These are not just nice, secular civic duties that we do to be polite citizens. They are the very fulfillment of the divine covenant.
They are the daily maintenance of the rope.
They are the exact active opposite of corruption. The revelation offers us a deeply rational, cohesive blueprint that links our smallest, seemingly insignificant daily actions to the grand fate of our entire civilization.
It is urging us to consciously activate these meanings, to stop unraveling the threads, and to become true builders of life.
Absolutely.
Thank you for walking us through the profound logic and implications of this verse.
Of course.
Today, we saw how societal ruin is not a mystery, but a highly logical sequence. It begins internally, in the quiet of our own minds, by breaking our innate moral covenant and silencing our conscience.
It really does.
It spreads outward by severing our vital, life-sustaining connections to humanity, to nature, and to justice.
And it inevitably culminates in the active spread of corruption on Earth, leaving those who pursue this path as the ultimate existential losers, bankrupt in this life and the next.
As you step back into your life, ask yourself a simple but heavy question. In the daily interactions, the rapid decisions, and the quiet habits that define your existence, are you acting as a builder, carefully weaving the threads of connection and justice, or are you quietly unraveling the rope?
That is the question we all have to answer.
That's it for this episode of Insights. If you found this reflection helpful, follow the show and join us next time as we continue verse by verse in the Quran. Until then, take one idea from this verse into your day.